So we're going to jump right into hearing from the experts that are in the room. As I mentioned, there's so many of the expertise that we need for our movement, so much of the passion and energy, and that will definitely be showcased on our stage today. Our first speaker on our panel is David Muraskin, who's the Managing Director for Litigation at FarmSTAND. David, come on up. David will be joined by Kenya Crumel, who directs the Black Land and Power Initiative at the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And then Eric Sheffer is the 6th generation owner-operator of Sheffers Grassland Dairy Farm. Welcome up.
You have to go in the order they put you on the slide, so I'm going to go first. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me. So, as the introduction said, as my shirt will tell you, my name is David Muraskin. I'm with FarmSTAND. We are a national legal advocacy organization, and in fact, the only national legal advocacy organization dedicated exclusively to taking on industrial animal agriculture. And I'm here because, as Senator Warren was saying, and as Farm Aid recognized, and as certainly FarmSTAND knows, the last year seems kind of scary in terms of the law, right? It feels like we don't know exactly what's going on. It feels like everything's changing under our feet. And if that's how you feel as a lawyer, let me tell you, that's right. It's true. That is something that is very much about what's going on in our society. But I'm also here to say that we're not going to let this tool go away for you. That we can do things even under this system that can advance exactly what Tim and others were talking about taking on industrial corporate power. On Wednesday of this week, we filed a suit against Tyson. We filed a suit against Tyson. Thank you. Yeah. We filed a suit against Tyson because it's lying about what it's doing. It's saying it's protecting the environment when we know that what it does, as compared to what you do, is exploit the environment. That what it does is it takes the value that you put into your land, of caring for your land, and try to use it to increase the profits of its shareholders. But we can take them on and say, no, this is value that belongs to the farmer. Next week, we're going to be in court in Arkansas suing another poultry company for exploiting poultry farmers. And on Monday, we're going to be in court in DC taking on the checkoff program because thank you. Because we know that it is going to line the pockets of corporations. What Senator Warren was talking about Chevron being overturned, is scary. But we're going to fight that too. This is actually the best opportunity for us in years to pass Packers and Stockyards Act rules and get them defended in court. Craig Watts, who many of you know, is in DC fighting against the attempt to take a power away from USDA. And that's just a misreading of what the Supreme Court held. The Supreme Court does lots of crazy things. It doesn't do that crazy things just yet. And we're going to be there to defend this. And how do we do this? And how do we do it well? And this is where you all come in. This is where us working together comes in. FarmSTAND's just a year old. It's actually a year old as of today. Thank you. Yeah, woo indeed. And our model is to learn from you, right? How do we know what to sue over? How do we know what needs attention? It's from talking to farmers in the field and saying, this is what's happening on my farm. This is what's happening in my community. This is what needs attention. And how we're going to then build power around that. What does that look like exactly? So Land Stewardship Project, a group in Minnesota that does great on-the-ground work organizing. Yeah, for sure. Does great work. They are fighting to maintain clean water. They're fighting to keep a dairy CAFO from doubling in size. And they reach out and they say, we have a campaign going. We're organizing people around this. We're talking to the media around this, but we need lawyers in court that can tell the same story and work hand in hand. And that's what we're seeking to do. And that's what we're seeking to do here today and seeking to do, talking for you, hopefully for years to come. How do we join the law, which was never about justice, but as a tool to hopefully build power to change, and join it with what you're doing on the ground so we can create long-term change, pass new laws, and hopefully make it somewhat closer to justice. So thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with all of you.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. So from the land perspective, I work for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, and we do many things, but I'm here to talk about land this morning, and obviously recognizing that the history of this country is built on land grabs. This is nothing new. It's not about Bill Gates and his 250,000 acres that he has grabbed up. This has been happening since the Doctrine of Discovery, right? 600 years. So, and that speaks to, obviously, that is a direct connection to the violent extraction of our indigenous families from this land. And it speaks to the 15 to 19 million acres that were stripped from black families. That was land that they acquired, that purchased, not just sharecropping, purchased 16 to 19 million acres during the Reconstruction era. And by the 1990s, we were down to 1 million. That's not just because we didn't want to farm that land, and we didn't have the knowledge to farm that land. And so the National Black Food and Justice Alliance uses that statistic as our North Star to reclaim, to liberate 15 million acres from the speculative market. And we're not just doing that for land to be held by the Alliance, but it's in partnership with so many others, like the Center for Heirs Property or the Southern Federation for Southern Cooperatives, thank you. There's the Center for the Ethical Transition of Land, ethical land transition out in California. There's so many groups that are doing this, and we are completely committed to working in partnership with these groups. And what we do with our 50-plus organizations that are a member of the Alliance is to organize, build institutions, and amplify these stories of people who have to, one, defend the land that we still have, just because people are still being run off, like violently kept off of their own land that they have in the title is in their name. So defending land, training land stewards on the skills that they need to collectively steward land. And then the institution that we launched last year is called the Resource Commons, and that is our non-extractive loan fund. So that is our way of battling these land grabs. Like, we're going to take this land and keep it off of the speculative market so that people can rematriate and work together and work towards food sovereignty and healthy nutrition. We want to ultimately eradicate food apartheid, right? There's no reason anybody is hungry in this country. And so those are the, yeah. Those are the, if you have any interest or know about land that's available, we know there's an aging population of farmers. You know, we work in partnership with others. We just helped to liberate 11.5 acres in upstate New York, a working farm that, you know, the owners were interested in passing on to people of color. So that's now in a land trust and moving on. So we want to replicate that throughout the country. So if you know about land, you know, that is maybe not willing to be freely transferred, but even if it's below market value, just so that it will be protected and used in a responsible way for bringing land to bringing food to our people. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. They certainly didn't save the best for last on this one, but I'll give it heck. So I'm Eric. My name's Eric Sheffer. I'm actually pretty local to here. I'm in Hoosick Falls, New York, about 45 minutes away. And I'm the 6th generation on my family's farm, and my son makes the 7th. And we actually, thank you. So we actually, believe it or not in the direct family name, but we actually date back all the way to 1774. Our farm was, bought in British pounds, and so I tell everyone I'm the generation trying not to screw it up. And it's not easy, but I think I'm going to just give you the quick story of how I've positioned our farm, because it kind of speaks to what this topic is all about. Because for about 16 years in my time managing the dairy, that's kind of how we've chosen what we've done. So back in 2008, I invested into the family farm. I got done with college, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. We're going to keep it going. We're going to grow the farm. And so we transitioned back to a dairy because the farm was actively done in the 80s during the buyout, and my father ran the farm differently. So over the course of about 6 years, we grew the farm up from 100 cows on grass. We were not organic at first, and just mostly for business reasons at the time where we were geographically. So we more than doubled the farm in 6 years, learned the true values of sweat equity, and grew the land base and grew the herd. And ironically, I was lobbying in D.C. In 14, and I was lobbying for good things within the dairy industry, but I was amongst some of the giants that have been referenced today. And I try to be humble at all times. Doesn't always work, but I try. And I just kind of said to myself, I am never going to be able to compete with some of these people. And I didn't want to. I wanted to be able to tell our story. So that summer we started the transition to organic, and that basically gets us to where we are today. So the tough thing about being a dairy farmer is you make a change, and this is true in many. This is not just a dairy thing, but that's what I know best. So you make changes to make yourself more competitive, and then you find that you're still in a situation as a small farmer where you're still not competitive, and you're still fighting, some of those giants that have every ability to do better than myself or you, whether it's access to capital, better access to programs within government. So while I spend a lot of time on the dairy, I do try to spend a lot of time working with organizations such as NODPA, the Northeast Organic Dairy Producers Alliance, as well as the Dairy Grazing Apprenticeship. I sit on the board. I'm the board president of that organization to try to help get young people into dairy because it's a high capital investment type of agriculture, one of the highest, really. And it's there's less and less of us that are doing it all the time. So I do spend a lot of time trying to help, whether it's younger people, older people, anyone that wants to be involved in agriculture. I try my best to do my part to help just get a fair shake. I don't see any of us jumping over these beasts, but if we could have a fair shake and have access to some of the similar things that they can thrive by using, it gives us a start. So that's my story.
Okay, in Missouri, we talk about the corporate takeover of hogs because they took all our hogs from us and took the market from us. In New York, I'd be remiss to not talk about what's going on with dairy farmers. It's not right, and we're fighting like hell to stop it. We're going to do some Q&A.
Absolutely. I heard a theme. I'm sure that there are folks that want to raise their hand and ask some questions. I heard a theme about, how intentional some of these dispossessions, these theft of land, opportunities, our laws, our legal institutions succumbing to these corporate influences and pressures. And so very inspired by these speakers. And I just wanted to remind everyone that this is a call to action. We're not just here to listen to them and watch and have a showcase. We're actually calling all of y'all to support each of our speakers and each of the groups that are in this room. And tomorrow on the Farm Aid website, there will be posted. Each group that's speaking today has an individual call to action. We're going to invite all of you all to support them as well. But we're going to start moving the mic around. I haven't seen any hands as yet, but I know there must be some questions from all these brilliant topics we've heard thus far.
So this is a question for Eric. I know that dairy, one of the main challenges is the volatility on the price of the milk. Don't you think that having a floor price for dairy will be a solution for some of the small dairy producers?
Yeah, so there's a huge divide between conventional and organic dairy production. One of the reasons we switched over to organic was one, because of the way we were farming naturally. But I will say that there's actually been less work by government because, so organic dairy is about 6% or so of total milk supply in this country, so it's still relatively small. So that's ironically where the most work probably needs to be done within organic dairy in particular is the pricing issues, because we don't have access to the data that is collected within the conventional milk market through FMMO and all the different USDA, actions that work to kind of make that safety net. We don't have that in organic. Just to, kind of a, for instance, I'm an open book, so I mean, I don't mind talking pricing at all. We were receiving over $40 for our milk, call it 5-6 years ago. We're now closer to 35, and we all know what costs have done. So everyone knows this, but we don't have the programs in place like what the conventional market does. So last year we were getting payments through the conventional milk market, and this year we're not, and arguably this year is significantly worse. So, price floors, as well as really just having a fair shake by getting some organic data, and not just organic. A lot of these niche markets really need more data collected through the government so that we can have what I keep calling a fair shake. There's a better word for it, but that's what I'm going with. So, yeah.
This is Duran Chavis, Richmond, Virginia. Question is for Kenya. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of creating pathways for farmers to get on land? I know over the course of the last couple of days, I've been hearing a lot about multi-generational farmers, people that have inherited land, and et cetera. Can you speak specifically about the importance of new farmers that have not had access to land, being able to access land, and how that intersects with the work of the Resource Commons and the National Black Food Justice Alliance?
Hello? Sure, thanks, Duran. And Duran's a member of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, so maybe that was a plant. No, but it's as I mentioned earlier, it's an aging population. Whatever the average age is for just in general, any farmer, it's 5 years less for Black farmers. And so it's really important to pass along those skills that couldn't easily be lost, right? So it's important to partner, bring on, and have incubators, like Duran has an incubator farming program at his land in Virginia, and just really pass along those skills. And I mentioned that we're providing trainings, so we supplement trainings at our member farms or other farms, like Soulfire here in New York has trained some of our members, just making sure that people have the skills that they need, not just with, scientific, the science of farming, but also animal husbandry and building structures that you need and building infrastructure on your land that you need. So, those are all ways. And then, of course, I mentioned, I didn't really go into detail, our Resource Commons Loan Fund. So over the last couple of years, since launching in 2023, we've been able to invest $1.5 million at some of our member farms to either acquire land or buy the equipment that they need to maintain the land. There's so many barriers, and as well as do infrastructure projects on the land. There's so many barriers to just getting the land is one thing, but then maintaining it and making sure you have a productive operation going on there. So we're aiming to support all of those needs at the Alliance.
I have a question for Eric. We see these in the Farm Bill. We have these get bigger, get off the farm policies that have been happening across the nation. Like I live in Iowa, where our dairy farms are becoming smaller or getting off the farm. But then at the same time, we have these 18,000 head huge. We had the barn fire down in Texas, and see it all across the Southwest. How are those, both the policy and how are the huge mega farms down in the Southwest impacting what you're doing?
So, something that's not necessarily overly known is that the organic dairy market in this country, believe it or not, is more consolidated as a percentage of milk supply than conventional. So the difference is that in the Northeast, it's not that way. That's, that was part of our, decision making. It was part of our decision, I guess, when we went organic, because we still thought we were more, competitive. But the consolidation out west is affecting every small farmer, no matter where you are in this country, and honestly, in whether you're organic or conventional. It's pretty crazy. The access to capital in an up and down market is so important because these really large farms that do have investment outside of that family, you know, some of these really large dairies out west, you know, they can winter, you know, they can weather the storm. They can get through these lows, and family farms can't. You know, if you're leveraged and you're running a small operation, it's 1 year, and you might be in that much trouble, especially with where the finance world is at right now. It's getting harder and harder to go to a lending agency and say, hey, you know, here's the forecast for the next 2 years. We're going to lose, you know, $500,000. It's a lot different when you're, you know, a 20,000 cow operation that has corporate investment, whether it be in land, cattle, you know. So it's a huge factor. And again, that's why with smaller ag in general, in my case dairy, really just having access to these programs is just so necessary, because that's the safety net. That's what a farm like mine needs to weather that storm. So consolidation out west has a huge factor.
Hi, I have a question for David. I'm over here.
Oh,
I'm over here. I'd like to know about some of the case law that you're planning to use for these litigations and which federal circuits you believe are more friendly towards this type of litigation, so that others who might be interested in this can start doing some research on how different federal circuits are dealing with these issues currently and the work we have to do to really push those issues forward.
Oh, a question only a lawyer could love. Thank you. So there's been a bit, just the circuits are the appellate courts. For those who don't know, they're right below the Supreme Court. There's been a big transition over the last 2 presidential administrations where courts that we thought were very friendly to interests that aren't corporate interests. The conservative issues tend to align very much with making money for corporations, and the non-conservative issues tend to be those that are caring more about people. And we've seen a big transition in the courts of late with the ping-ponging back and forth, which is what the question's about. And the answer is, and this is really what FarmSTAND's interested in doing, we will work with you to figure out what works in your jurisdiction, right? This isn't about planting a case to make it work and get a one-off news coverage, right? The way we think we build power around this is about planting a case in your community where the community is already building something and we can amplify that. And then the question is, how do we use the legal tools that are there, even if they're constricted, to your advantage? So, you know, Chevron, which Elizabeth Warren mentioned, right? Like, one thing we can do is we're not going to unilaterally disarm. If you don't like a rule, we should start challenging some rules if they don't like rules on the other sides. If you do like a rule, we should be out there shouting. We should be out there shouting in every jurisdiction we can, because they've been filing cases all over. We are working on behalf of workers right now, H-2A workers, which the administration is trying to get the right to organize. There are cases filed in Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky. We should be out there fighting wherever you want to fight to help you build your power, because it's not about getting the law right this time. It's not about winning in court. We're going to lose sometimes. That's okay. The deck's stacked against us right now. This is about long-term shift, and that's how we think about it. But I'd be happy to nerd out with you on specific circuits and judges, just not in front of everyone, so not to bore them. Yeah.
Eric, my name's Justin Trammell, and I'm out of Amarillo, and I'm in the meat business. We raise sheep and hogs and poultry and beef, and then we got a state-inspected processing facility. So one thing that we've found on the meat side, and I'm curious if you guys see this on the dairy side, is that smaller processors like us are actively locked out of even mid-sized grocery retailers. One of the processors I know actually in Missouri, Herzog Meats, they had their ground beef in just a local grocery store chain, and then the meat supplier came around and threatened those little grocery stores and said, if you don't pull their ground beef, we won't sell you anything, period, ever again. So I was curious if we run into that on the dairy side as well.
Well, that's a tough one. On the organic side of things, you know, on a large level, there's really only really a few of the the larger companies. I believe it says up there. I'm a Stonyfield. It's a big company. The biggest thing I can say on the organic side is it's really not about getting locked out of the retailers as much as you just at a small level with dairy, it's so hard to compete. It's like 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 small milk processors make it, and that's both conventional and organic. It's just a very, very tough market to get into. I've never tried to, market on my own with my own label. Believe it or not, I didn't mention it, but we actually have just started our own meat company as well. We're getting involved in beef and pork. We've always wanted to do it, and I guess the time is now, so we kicked it off. But yeah, so I mean, I do think it's dissimilar than beef, but there's still certainly those issues out there, especially on the conventional side.
Can I stay on for a second? I think this is a great example of something that only you will know. Something that Eric said earlier that I think is really important is one of the ways companies operate is by hiding information. That's how they consolidate power, is by holding that information. And I think this is a great example of the type of communication that people like me need to hear from the field and need to know to understand what's going on. One thing we're really interested in, for instance, is slaughterhouses are closing all over the country, and how many farmers are not being told about that, but being told to invest while the companies know the slaughterhouse is closing. And we don't know that you're being told to invest, but there's a real problem there. And so this kind of dialogue is just exemplary of both what Eric's talking about in terms of the problem and how I think we can start getting at some of the solutions.
This question is for Kenya. I'm from Kentucky. And so do you all do the South also?
Yes, we work nationally. The majority of our members are currently in the Southeast, but we have representation all over the country. You said you're in Kentucky?
I'm in Kentucky.
Our field director is in Louisville, so yes.
Okay, so my question is actually about the land that's in Mississippi, because as you know, there was quite a bit of money received for the settlement. And they were all mainly older people. But what has happened is that because those older people got all that money, now the younger generation is like, hey, you can make some money with farming. But a lot of the BIPOC farmers, they do not have their land in order. So it's like it might still be in, the great-great-grandparents' names and things like that. So is that the type of thing that you said the loan that you had, will that cover to get all of that in order?
Well, we're in the process of launching a land defense applications, but there are people who are already doing it. I mentioned the Center for Heirs Property, and I believe the Federation still does that too. They have a land assistance fund. Land Loss Prevention Project works in North Carolina, but they have amazing resources on their website. So those are just a few places that I would recommend that you check out. Savvy Horn is here from Land Loss Prevention Project.
So thank you for that question. I didn't see the person who asked the question. Oh, okay, we'll talk. You mentioned briefly, Kenya, the land defense program of the Black Land and Justice space. So I was wanting to know if you could go into a little bit more detail so we could see if there are tractions for other groups to begin to think that through and build and connect with our strategies and work, and therefore build power to strengthen the work nationally, little by little, and because I think that's really important, because some of these strategies could be used in Indian country and around fractionation. And I think the more we come together, on common strategies and build power within communities and the resource base of where people could get help, that's important. So I would like you to kind of walk us through some of the strategies and maybe ways that might point towards commonality of building power across the country for threatened land everywhere, and not just here.
You might be able to
I could
speak
probably
to,
answer the question, but you're in the hot seat. I mean, I could say one thing. The Equity Commission of the USDA did grapple with land and how we can impact land ownership. And as a result, the Equity Commission strengthened the ability to get groups together in Congress to begin to think about strategies. And so today you have like 4 bills on heirs property that needs to be worked on and strengthened and move forward. And I think when we had discussed land, the Native American land question, as we call the black land question, Native American, came to the fore, and the history of fractionation and what that means, but also in the Southeast, where you tend to have not federally recognized tribes, but you still have tribal communities. They face land loss issues because land loss is created by state law, and it happened to come into being right after the Civil War. So a lot of folk got together and said, well, how are we going to strip back land ownership from black and brown people and Native people? So with these crushing laws coming up, not just in to address land rights in Native American and African American and Appalachia communities, I think if you look across the board, there are common strategies that we need to support each other on, like these heirs property legislation. We need to increase the resource bases of community-based organization to do the work. They have been doing it. And a little thing that I have, and Dana knows it, is around the need to train up a cadre of African-American family land specialists that could go with families and talk through heirs property. And I think that would apply with fractionation as well in Native American communities. How do we have these conversations within our families and come together to protect the land? Because if you don't come together to protect the land, you're going to lose it, because that's the force that's in play. And it's not just here, y'all. It's happening in the Caribbean. It happens in Southern Africa. It happens in Brazil. So then it says to me that that is an international response to peasants of the world holding land. That is a threat to capitalism that we must address. So thank you.
Yeah, my question, actually it relates. I'm Albiana Woodard Davis, and my land is in Texas. I'm here representing the Federation. But my question, she practically answered it, but one of the things I'm concerned about, because the community where my land is located, it used to be predominantly African American, maybe 90% or more, but now it has dwindled to less than 20%, mainly because of the oil and gas production. But a lot of the black families, they're losing their lands because of antiquated laws as it relates to adverse possession, as it relates to easements and even the taxes, because when you speak of heirs property, so many of the younger generations, they're not even aware that this land existed from their great-great-grandparents and so forth, so they're losing it for pennies because of taxes. So I guess my question is, what is being done to advocate more to change the law to where it's not as, not so easy to go in and take land?
Mama Savvy, do you want to answer that?
What's a state issue and what's a federal issue in that regard?
Yeah, this is becoming really legal. So let's just, what I want to, I'll pick up on some notes of that comment, but one of the themes that I'm hearing across all of our speakers, because I was sitting there kind of like, how do these three things go together? I don't know if anyone else feeling like that? How do these three speakers go together? And I think part of what we've heard in terms of what's uniquely connecting these three themes is the ways in which our power structure has really consolidated all of the policy decision-making in the hands of corporations, right? And so when we think about why the Farm Bill came into existence in the 1930s, we have to kind of go before that and think about the U.S. land policies and the ways in which the U.S. land policies were trying to mitigate competition of all the availability of the land in the western part of the country. It's so interesting to hear that all the way going back before in the early 1900s of this country, we're thinking about the west and the southwest, those farms getting too big and way too competitive so that farmers in the northeast wouldn't be able to make a living for their families. Policies like the Farm Bill came into existence because we needed to really make a way for family farmers to stay on their land, to keep their children on the land, to keep them employed and on the land so that they're connected not just to the family's dairy operation, but also to their family's history and legacy. So that's a theme that we're hearing. And then when we talk about the redistribution of the land that's being consolidated amongst elderly folks or folks that aren't aware of their legal rights, with heirs property in particular being a product of state law, that means that we can't just talk about the federal Farm Bill. We also have to be talking about the organizing that's happening in every single state to get each state's intestacy laws to address the ways in which folks can lose their land as a product of state law. So the question of that particular issue, I think, is one that connects directly to the consolidation of corporate power, because there are functions of federal law, which we all have to be aligned on regardless of region of the country, and then there are issues of state law that we all have to have support within our organizing that we do within our state to address those state issues. And so I think that that's one of the ways that the financing in land defense can be thinking strategically about the ways in which we have to be organizing for bigger fights every couple of years when we're talking about the Farm Bill. But we can't just focus on this election or this Farm Bill. We have to constantly, like David said, be thinking about our strategy for the long term. Because when we think of whatever laws get passed right now and who's in the courts and how our courts are so biased towards corporate consolidation, that has made a lot of law firms and a lot of the new generation of attorneys afraid to even take on some of these smaller issues because it's going to get decided against. And when the Federation was being supported by Farm Aid to try to intervene in that lawsuit that was against American Rescue Plan Act, the debt relief, the emergency debt relief for financially distressed borrowers, that was challenging the 14th, the way in which we have programs that are race-specific. So all of the affirmative action lawsuits that we've seen come under that umbrella. Farm Aid was supporting black farmers in probably the least favorable federal circuit, right? And we had a panel of judges that unanimously agreed that the black farmers were supposed to be allowed to intervene. So it's not just about shopping for the right venues or shopping for the right states or shopping for that one issue that's going to get us all the way through across the board and have a different agricultural system. We really have to be thinking about all the ways in which we're all tethered together. The lawyers have a role to play in training the next generation of lawyers. The farmers have a role to play in training the next generation of farmers. The advocates have a role to play in training the next generation of advocates. And that's because, as each of these folks have said, they're only one, just like each of us in this room. We're only one, and that's enough. That's enough, because no one's going to have the passion that you have about your issue that you have. But if you can make a friend in this room and you can help them understand the ways in which corporate consolidation impacts the ability of an individual farmer to make a living, impacts his decision about estate planning and whether he encourages his kids to stay in dairy or to go off farm and find a different job, those are the ways in which we get enough data collectively to make changes, to make arguments in front of elected officials and in front of judges that is a united movement against corporate consolidation. So we are each critically important. These themes are connected because each of our issues is intertwined. And we have to be telling that story with the same language and the same vision. And I'm really, really excited to kick it off this way, because I know it got a little bit like lawyer wonky stuff there. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm over it. But I'm really, really excited that we can think about each of the issues that were represented here and the farmer's perspective and how that might be, you know, dairy might be different from corn or soybean or whatever, but when you really think about the small family farmer and the ways in which U.S. policy was really designed to help our family farmers thrive, and now we're in a state where our family farmers are having to bend over backwards and do all these different things and lobby in D.C. just to be able to provide for their families. That means that we already have laws, right? We already know that we can, in this country, make laws to address the needs of our family farmers. So that's a really exciting opportunity, right? Let's do it. So thank you so much to our first panel. Thanks a lot.